So for Choose Your Own Adventure number 2, I chose to look at legal cases and compare and contrast two different legal cases that I retrieved from the OCT website. So this is an overview of case number 1. So there was a new student that moved into the school in which the member that was being accused in the case worked at, and it was placed in her particular class. This member befriended the student and the student's family almost immediately. The member gave the student special privileges, so she would let the student stay in at recess to finish work. She would allow the student to sit out of certain classes if the student didn't want to participate. She allowed the student extra time to finish work that was being done in class, and etc. The member had constant contact with the student outside of school hours, and giving the student her personal phone number and using social media as an outlet for communicating daily outside of school hours. So she would particularly use Facebook and Twitter to contact and message that child, that student, back and forth once the student had gone home. The member often spent time alone with the student both in and outside of school. So this teacher would take the student out for lunch, she would take him to the mall, after school, etc. The member betrayed the parent by continuing with these actions after being asked by parents to stop. So the parents addressed the situation and that they were uncomfortable with what was happening, and the teacher continued to go about doing this the same way. And then also the principal got involved after contacted by the parents, and the principal also warned her that her professionalism was at stake, and she continued to do these actions. There's a link to the case study right at the bottom if you would like to investigate further. So in case study number 2, there was a member who acted inappropriately and unprofessionally in the presence of his students. The member discussed his nipple ring with students and showed it to them upon their request. The member engaged in roughhousing with male students in a playful way, and this included twisting their wrists and using physical touching as ways to get their attention. Member frequently poked, touched, and tickled students as a means of getting their attention, as was just said. Member made inappropriate and unprofessional comments to students. The member used inappropriate and unprofessional language in the presence of students as well. So then again, there's a direct link to the case underneath in case you want to investigate it. Why I chose these case studies. So in both case studies, there's a nature of it being a situation where the teacher may not necessarily realize the harm in his or her actions, and I think that this can be quite common for new teachers who are not yet familiar with all of the rules and regulations, and who are also trying to build relationships with students. So both teachers put trying to build friendly relationships in these case studies with students above their professional standards. And again, I think that this is something as new teachers, such as ourselves, going into the field can be quite common, because we are trying so hard to build those connections with our students, and we want them to like us and to accept us and to think that we're a great asset to them and to that school, and therefore we might sometimes think that befriending them is the best way to ensure that the students like us and that we're being accepted. So both teachers had multiple opportunities to rectify their actions, yet they chose to ignore warnings of potential professional misconduct. So this again is something that's really important as we enter our careers as teachers, that we are a community of teachers, and the school we work on is a community, and so we are helping one another. So if we are being warned and our colleagues and our principals are telling us that we need to be addressing certain things differently, then again, we need to listen and we need to think about what we're being told, because we are a community and we are representing that entire school. And then both cases showed individuals who forgot that their role as a teacher was to educate and to ensure students. So again, both teachers got lost in trying to be accepted and trying to be friendly with their students and trying to build relationships, yet they forgot that by doing so they might be putting students' safety at risk, which is the number one reason why what we are placed in schools to do, to teach and to ensure that the students are safe while being taught. So the significance to me as an Ontario teacher, I think that these cases show the importance of knowing the standards of the teaching profession as outlined by the OCT. It is so, so important to educate ourselves. And so these cases showed me how important it is to know what my role is and what it should be while I'm in the classroom and outside of the classroom, because this profession is a 24-hour job, and we are always teachers no matter where we go. Also, knowing which actions are unbecoming of a member and finding ways to build relationships with students without crossing boundaries. I think these case studies showed me that there are ways that you can build these relationships without jeopardizing your role as a teacher and how you're viewed as a teacher. It's extremely important to know what my role as a teacher is and what the students' roles are, and these two should never be confused. Again, we are there to build connections and to build relationships with our students in a positive and professional way. It is extremely important to remember that we are still the teacher, and we are in charge of educating and keeping the students safe. So the student and teacher role are two distinct roles that should not be confused. And it's important for me to know my rights and who to contact if any claims are ever made against me professionally. As we spoke in our classes, there are certain people who are in charge of protecting and who are there, our unions, who are there to ensure that we have someone to talk to and someone to represent us if anything does arise. So I think these cases kind of showed me that if any situation does arise or my integrity or professionalism is being questioned, that there are people there who will represent me in a positive light and who will hopefully help me make sense. So the decision that came from case 1, which was the case where the teacher befriended the student and gave them special privileges and took them outside, the member was reprimanded in person at the Ontario College of Teachers. The member was ordered to take a course on maintaining professional boundaries with students and the use of social media. The member had to provide the college with evidence of the learning attained in this professional development course. The course had to be completed within 30 days, and another review was done post-course. And then finally, once all this was done, if the member did well, which she did in this case, the member was allowed to return back to work. For case number 2, the decision was that the member was reprimanded by the OCT, and the findings were published with the name of this member in the official publication of the Ontario College of Teachers, Professionally Speaking, which we're all familiar with, the Blue Pages. The member was ordered within 90 calendar days to again successfully complete a course of instruction by a practitioner approved by the registrar with respect to the importance of maintaining appropriate boundaries with students. And then the member was also asked to provide the registrar with written confirmation that he successfully completed this course of instruction within 30 days after completion, and the member was then again allowed to return to work. Again, in this particular case, because his name was published, you do have that profile built, and if your students or parents or other professionals go and look you up, you do have that under your name. You do have all this information out there. So again, such a silly act and such a thoughtless act on his part led him to maybe jeopardizing his future career. So some of the legal implications as per the Charter of Rights and Freedoms. So everyone has the two following fundamental freedoms that I thought were kind of contradictory to the outcome of both of these cases. So everyone has the freedom of thought, belief, opinion, and expression, including freedom of the press and other media of communication. So for case number 1, we know that the teacher was questioned because of her contacting the student via social media. So she used Twitter and Facebook to contact the student outside of school, and she was again addressed for this, and she was reprimanded a large part because of this communication through these media outlets. So it's kind of going against this, because we are saying in the Charter of Rights and Freedoms that people do have freedom to use the press and media and communication, yet when it comes to this teaching profession, she was reprimanded because of this. And it does make sense, because we don't want that constant communication outside of school. It shows a lack of professionalism, but it does in a way, go against the Charter of Rights and Freedoms. And then we also look at the freedom of association. So in both cases, the teachers were reprimanded as they were being unprofessional and associating with their students in a way that was unbecoming to them as a member of the college. But again, they have the freedom of association and they can befriend and be friends outside of the classroom with whomever they please, technically, but as a teacher, you can't. It goes against your teaching profession and what you promise to do as a teacher. And finally, we look at the legal implications as per Ontario laws. So for case number 1, the member was guilty of professional misconduct as defined in the Ontario College of Teachers Act. She failed to maintain the standards of the profession, contrary to certain regulations. She abused or students psychologically or emotionally, contrary to the Ontario regulation again. She failed to comply with the Education Act, revised statutes of Ontario. She committed acts that, having regard to all the circumstances, would reasonably be regarded by members as disgraceful, dishonorable, or unprofessional, contrary again to the Ontario regulation. And she engaged in conduct. So for case 2, it was alleged that Andrew John Hogg was guilty of professional misconduct as defined in subsection 30 of the Ontario College of Teachers Act. It outlines that he failed to maintain the standards of the profession, contrary to the Ontario regulation, and he engaged in conduct unbecoming of a member, contrary to the Ontario regulation. So as we can see, both cases kind of are based around teachers who made poor decisions, both inside and outside of school, that affected the way that people viewed them as a professional in the field of education and as a member of the Ontario College of Teachers.